Hey, welcome once again to another episode of B&B Hockey Talk, and I'm Aaron Bloxel with my co-host, Mr. Matthew Balzer. Today, we are going to continue our 31 teams in 31 days as we're nearing the end with the Winnipeg Jets. For those of you that are wondering, there's lots of Twitter uproar because the Canucks are in the news a little bit with potential trades. We're going to save a lot of that stuff for tomorrow because there's some stuff that will come out later tonight on air, and a lot of it's just speculation, so we can touch on that tomorrow when we get into the Vancouver Canucks. So, Matt, welcome. How you doing? You ready to talk Winnipeg or what?
Oh, yeah, ready to talk Winnipeg. But, yeah, it'll be interesting to see what all goes down with Benning being on the radio for President's Week on 1040 and their Chief Operating Officer, Jeff Stepik. For those wondering, they're both doing an hour each on TSN 1040, so there'll be lots of news coming tomorrow for the Canucks.
Excellent. Well, let's get right into the Winnipeg Jets. Second place in the entire NHL last year. Mm-hmm. A little bit of a change. They lost a couple of players, but more or less the same lineup. Why don't we start off with the forwards and talk about some of their drafting that they've done over the years?
Yeah, so David Cheveldayoff has done probably one of the best drafting since they came into existence in 2011 till now. Starting in 2011, they drafted Mark Scheifele in the first round and Adam Lowry in the third round. In 2012, they took Jacob Trouba in the first round, and in the fifth round, Connor Hellebuck, who's now their big starting goaltender. In 2013 was a heck of a year for them. They took in the first round Josh Morrissey. In the second round, they took both Nick Batan and Eric Comrie. And in the fourth round, they took Andrew Kopp. And in the fifth round, Tucker Poolman. And in 2014, they got Nikolai Ehlers. In 2015, both in the first round, they got Kyle Connor and Jack Roslovic. And in 2016, they got the big superstar Patrick Laine in the first round, and also Logan Stanley, who hasn't played in the NHL yet, but maybe in a year or two will be on the team. And in 2017, they took Christian Vesalainen, who will be probably looking for a roster spot to start this year in 2017. So basically every year in the first round, they've basically hit a home run just to add to their team. And to see where they are now, being one of the best teams in the NHL, they're really fun to watch.
Yeah, lots of good drafting out of Winnipeg. They're very good at bringing along their prospects. There will be some prospects we'll talk about later in the show, including a couple that you mentioned. And we'll touch on because they're going to be fighting for roster spots, as there is a potential couple roster spots open from the departure of Paul Stastny and Tobias Enstrom. Let's get into their lineup. Let's talk about the forwards. What do you see? Most people will know their top six, but let's touch on all four lines and what it looks like.
All right. Yeah, so their top six is pretty well set, all returning players from last year. The big line, Kyle Connor, Mark Scheifele, and Blake Wheeler. Kyle Connor had an excellent rookie season in Winnipeg. He had 31 goals and 57 points in 76 games. Mark Scheifele broke out with a super star year, 60 points in 60 games. And in the playoffs, I believe he had around 15 goals or something like that. And that was only through 3 rounds of the playoffs. So the Jets had gone to the finals. You could have potentially had a 20-goal playoffs, which is unheard of in these days. And Blake Wheeler had an excellent year, 91 points in 81 games. Him and Scheifele really, really clicked throughout the year. Wheeler being the big setup man with 68 of the 91 points being assists. With the big thing with Wheeler, though, is that he'll be an unrestricted free agent at the end of the year. So it's really key for the Jets to re-sign him. this off season or through the year. The second line, Nikolai Ehlers, Brian Little, and Patrick Laine. Laine probably the second best pure goal scorer to Alexander Ovechkin in the NHL. Had 44 goals, 70 points in 82 games. Nikolai Ehlers, one of the guys that Canuck fans sometimes yell about that they should have drafted over Virtanen. Had another big breakout year, 29 goals, 60 points in 82 games. And Brian Little moved down the lineup when they got Paul Stastny at the trade deadline, but he should move back up into that second line position. Had 43 points in 82 games, but his point totals dipped a little bit as he got pushed down the lineup. The third line I have as Matthew Perreault, Adam Lowry, and Jack Roslovic. Perreault is one of those smaller wingers, but that can produce between the 40-50 point mark. He battled some injuries that limited him to 70 games, but he still had 39 points. And Lowry also dealt with injuries, but he still had a productive year, 21 points in 45 games. Big center iceman that could potentially get moved down the line up to the fourth line, depending on how some younger guys do. And Jack Roslovic, I think, could potentially be a Rookie of the Year candidate. Got into 31 games last year and had 14 points, and I think could be a breakout year for him. The fourth line I have as Brandon Tanev, Andrew Kopp, and Marco Dano. Kopp had 28 points in 82 games, and Brandon Tanev, brother of Chris Tanev, had actually a pretty good playoff. And with Lowry and Kopp on that fourth line during last year's playoffs, was one of the most effective fourth lines in the playoffs last year. Dano could be in and out of the lineup as I bring up a couple other guys. Nick Batan, he's been on a fringe player being between the NHL and the AHL. Last year he had 52 points in 52 games in the American League. And only got into 15 games in the NHL, but had 2 goals. I think he could potentially get into that third line center spot. He's a great playmaker, and if he gets in with those guys like Roslovic and Perreault, I think he could fit in really nicely. And another guy, Brendan Lemieux, who they got in the Vander Kane trade many years ago with Buffalo. Is a really feisty player. He had 43 points in 51 games last year in the American League, but he got into 9 games in the NHL last year. Had 1 goal, but he had 21 penalty minutes, and I think he could be a perfect fit on that fourth line this year.
Brendan Lemieux, of course, taking after his old man, Claude Lemieux, who, despite a lot of people hating that guy was the most unbelievable playoff performer for me growing up with New Jersey Devils and, of course, the Colorado Avalanche. The Detroit fans definitely would remember those days. Anyways, their top 6 are unbelievable. I mean, Mark Scheifele really came into his own this year. Blake Wheeler absolutely took his game to another level. I don't know if he's going to be able to repeat what he did this year, but there shouldn't be any reason why he can't, because he has all the tools. He is a great, his leadership is something that really he really brings to the Winnipeg Jets. And I expect guys like Kyle Connor and Nick Ehlers to raise their game to another level this year. So lots of speed, lots of youth. These forwards are definitely primed to have another good season. I do want to touch on as well that Adam Lowry, to me, is a little underrated. He is a big body. He's a heavy body, and his work in the playoffs was not very noticed by the television announcers. But, man, he did a lot of work, a lot of the hard work for Winnipeg on that third and fourth line whenever he was out there, and he's a great penalty killer. So lots to look forward to that forward unit. I mean, they are explosive. There's a lot of goals that can come out of those guys like Laine, Scheifele, Wheeler, right? So it'll be really fun. But anyways, let's talk about their defense. I'm going to start it off with going through their defensemen. Josh Morrissey, who still needs a contract for this season, had an excellent rookie season, really helped solidify that top line. or the top pairing with defense partner Jacob Trouba. Jacob Trouba, as you know, seems to be going year to year, getting an RFA deal and almost going to arbitration every time. So don't know if Winnipeg will ever get tired of that, but Trouba absolutely had a great playoff. He's got size, he's got skill, and he's really solid force all over the ice. In fact, their whole right side on defense is just incredible. So the next pairing I've got is Dmitry Kulikov and Dustin Byfuglien. Kulikov, of course, was a healthy scratch in a few playoff games this year, only because Tobias Enstrom got back in. But with him gone, he'll look to move up his game a little bit more. And Dustin Byfuglien, I mean, what else can you say about this guy? Just a pure leader, had an amazing playoff run, and even regular season he had, he was able to put up the points and lead his team, not only with his physical play. I mean, a lot of people will remember watching the playoffs where he kept going in and grabbing two guys at one time. And the announcers on TV were having fun with that because Big Buff, as everyone knows, is absolute beast when it comes to that kind of stuff. So their fifth and sixth defensemen I have as Ben Sherratt and Tyler Myers. Of course, Tyler Myers would be the number one or two guys on most teams, all 6'7" of them. He's absolute beast as well on defense. And he'll probably still get a lot of ice time. I mean, I'm sure some of those right-handed shooters are going to be playing the left side at some point, whether it's the penalty kill or however they want to do it, because I know Liney plays a point on the power play. So just to get those guys ice time, I mean, Myers is a big body that can block a lot of shots. He's really solid defensively, and he can still put up points. So their seventh defenseman is Joe Morrow, and he will definitely get into a few games as they acquired him at the trade deadline last year, I believe, from St. Louis. Their eighth defenseman is Tucker Poolman, who Matt touched on already. He's still really young and just making his way into the league. He may be fighting for some ice time. He may actually start with Manitoba Moose in the AHL, but he could definitely see some games, especially if any injuries occur. What do you got for the defense, Matt, and then take us through their goaltenders?
Yeah, so their back end is pretty loaded. As you mentioned, on that right side, Byfuglien, Myers, and Trouba. Myers is a unrestricted free agent at the end of this year. As I forgot to mention, Connor and Lane and, of course, Jacob Trouba, now all restricted free agents at the end of the year. So on top of Wheeler and Myers, they have to get Connor, Lane, and Jacob Trouba all new contracts. And they only have about $10.2 million right now. But with having to still re-sign Josh Morrissey, that could potentially be more, around $6-7 million at the end of the day. Byfuglien, as you say, it's sort of weird being a Canuck fan and just knowing how much I hated this guy while he played for Chicago. But now he's one of my favorite defensemen to watch. Probably the toughest defenseman that you never want to go up against. Like that one hit on Mark Stone a couple years ago where he just absolutely destroyed him, just laid him out, clean body check, open ice. But yeah, the guy does it both ends of the rink. His goal totals were a little low this year. He only had 8 goals in 69 games. He had been averaging probably between the 15 to 20 goal mark the few years before that. So I think his goal totals will go up a little bit this year. The big thing is if they can get Jacob Trouba locked up long term, if he can finally commit to Winnipeg long term, that'll be huge for the Jets. Otherwise, they'll have to look to trade him this off season, because I think he has one more year of RFA eligibility, and then he can finally become an unrestricted free agent, and that'll be big decision if to either re-sign Myers or lock up Trouba long term.
And of course, let's talk about their goaltending. They brought in the big free agent last year to start off with Steve Mason. Absolutely failed experiment. And so why don't we talk about his replacement, Connor Hellebuyck, and how their goaltending is shaping up this year.
All right, yeah. So one thing that I've always said over the past couple of years is that I thought the Jets always had a really good defense, really good offense, but they had zero goaltending, which sucks for trying to get to the playoffs every year, and knowing that you have a lot of pieces in place, but without goaltending, you're not going to go anywhere. And they thought Steve Mason was going to be that, but in his first game, well, he didn't last the whole game to start that first game. And then Connor Hellebuck just absolutely had a beastly year for Winnipeg. 44, 11, and 9 in 67 games, 6 shutouts, 9.24 save percentage, and a finalist for the Vezina Trophy this year. And some people would argue that he should have won the Vezina Trophy this year over Pekka Rinne, just because some people believe that the older goalies get. It's more of a mark of just over time of what those guys have accomplished. And with Rinne getting up there in age. But I still think Rinne should have won the Vezina Trophy. I think he was the most consistent from start to finish in the NHL. But Hellebuck, yeah, this just finally stabilized the back end for them. And with the backup goalie situation, it'll be a battle between Eric Comrie and Laurent Brossoit, who they brought in through free agency. He failed to solidify the backup role in Edmonton, but I think Eric Comrie will emerge as the backup goalie this year. He went 18, 13, and 3, a 9.16 save percentage, and 2 shutouts in the American League last year, and got into 3 games with the Jets going 1-2. Not overly good numbers, but I think with his numbers in the American League, I think he should win out the backup role.
Connor Hellebuck, of course, has one of the weirdest pregame rituals that you'll ever see. You can YouTube it. He does some weird stuff with his eyes to help him get focused prior to the game. But let's talk about some of their prospects. You've already touched on Brandon Lemieux. We've talked about guys like Nick Patan and Tucker Pullman. I'll let you touch on the first few, including their first-round pick from last year, Christian Vesalainen. So why don't you take it away, and then we'll touch on a couple more.
All right, yeah. So Vesalainen, I think, could potentially make the team out of training camp. He absolutely ripped up the Finnish Elite League last year. 22 goals, 43 points in 49 games, and another 8 points in 18 playoff games. And I think he could potentially make a spot on that third line, or potentially maybe even move up into that top 6, even though they are already loaded up on the wings there. Another guy that I'd bring up is their other first-round pick in 2016, Logan Stanley. Had 15 goals and 42 points in 61 games for Kitchener, and another 16 points in 19 games in the playoffs. This is another huge defenseman. I believe he's also around like 6'7", along with Tyler Myers. So another huge defenseman on the back end. And another guy I'd like to bring up, another defenseman, Sami Niku, who was a 7th-round pick in 2015. Had an amazing year in the American League, 16 goals and 54 points in 76 games. With the logjam of defensemen that the Jets have, it'd be interesting to see where he fits in to start the year. With him being a left-hand shot, I think a guy like Ben Sherratt could potentially move down the lineup or get traded if some of these guys have good training camps and they want to move in a younger direction. And last guy I'll bring up is Skylar McKenzie, a 7th-round pick in 2017, had 47 goals and 87 points in 72 games for the Portland Winterhawks, and another 8 points in 12 games. Being a 7th-round pick and getting those types of numbers, I think he'll start in the American League. But he's another intriguing prospect that I'd like to see how things go this year.
Sami Niku, I also think he has an outside shot on making this team. 7th-round pick in 2015, and you touched on him as an offensive defenseman. He's also named the AHL Top Defenseman of the Year and made the first All-Star team in the AHL. So he's done everything he can pretty much do in the AHL. Even got Rookie of the Year down there. They'll have to make way for him if he is ready at training camp. A couple guys I'll touch on is a guy named Mason Appleton, who was a 6th-round pick in that same year, 2015. Had a good season for the Moose. 76 games. He had 66 points. And then in the playoff games, unfortunately, I believe he had an injury and he only got in a couple of games, had 1 point. But he is somebody that was drafted late. He's worked hard. He's had almost a point a game last year. Could be vying for one of those potential spots on the 3rd or 4th line. And then this year, their 2nd-round pick is a centerman named David Gustafsson. He's probably a couple of years at least away, but he had a decent season for a young guy in the SHL over in Sweden. 12 points in 45 games. They're pretty high on him, and that just goes to show you how deep their prospect pool is. So that's all I've got on prospects. Do you have any more you want to touch on at all?
No, that's about it. I'll just touch more on Roslovic. Before he did get called up to the big club, he has 35 points in only 32 games in the American League. So that's why I think he will make the team. Maybe battling between him and Vesalainen for that 3rd line winger spot.
Well, like we said, 2nd overall in the NHL last year. 2nd in their division because of the Nashville Predators, but 114 points. Where do you see them finishing this year, and how many points are you projecting?
All right, so it'll be a battle between them and Nashville again for that top spot. Last year, Nashville won out. I think this year, Winnipeg will finish in 1st place in the Central Division. Not by much again, but I would say around the same point totals, maybe possibly pushing up into that 120-point range, which would be very impressive if they could get there. But, yeah, I think it all comes down to those head-to-head matches between Nashville and Winnipeg of who comes first in the Central and potentially first in the NHL overall standings this year.
Well, of course, that matchup with the Nashville Predators that they ended up winning, I think absolutely sucked the life out of them, and they just had no gas left at all when they had to play Las Vegas in the 3rd round. I don't think they're going to get as high as points. I mean, their record last year was amazing. And I don't think they're quite as strong as they were when they finished up the season, but I still see about 105 to 110 points. I do see them finishing in either 2nd or 3rd in the division because I really see Nashville still holding on with that defense that they have. And then, of course, the rise of St. Louis, if they get the goaltending, could possibly give them a bit of a challenge or a competition as well for that 2nd spot. But I think they'll finish 2nd. It is possible they could slide down depending on how St. Louis finishes, but it'll be interesting to see. Canada will have at least another team in the playoffs this year, right? As we'll have at least 2, if not 3 in there. But that's our show for today, unless there's anything else you want to add about Winnipeg.
No, that's about it. But yeah, I think it's nice to have a Canadian team that you can sort of cheer for because like Ottawa and Winnipeg are about those 2 teams that's nobody really hates in Canada. But and every other team is just you sort of just I don't want those guys to win the Stanley Cup over whichever Canadian team you root for. Yeah, no, good point for sure. So thanks everyone for watching. Remember to hit the like button or the love button on Facebook. Comment or share if you share our post. We will give you a shout out on our next episode, our next edition. And follow us not only on Facebook but on YouTube. Hit subscribe. And, we love to have you share our content. So thanks again for watching or listening wherever you may be. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we will see you tomorrow as we start a 2-day overview of the potential Vancouver Canucks roster. And, man, we have our work cut out for us with the multiple different types of people that could make this hockey club. So we'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a great night, and we'll talk to you later.